Section 1. Hello, my name is Jack Callahan, and I perform as Reihe. The piece on this record is organized into 7 discrete sections, each separated by 12 seconds of silence. This is the first section. The only sound source is my voice, which is processed through a vocoder created in Max MSP and will continue to be altered in different ways throughout the rest of this piece. Let me give you a little background on the vocoder. The vocoder, or voice encoder, was developed in the late 1930s by Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey, as a way to code speech in order to reduce its bandwidth for transmission over long distances. A standard vocoder works by taking the voice signal, which is called the modulator, and splitting it into a number of frequency bands. The more bands, the higher the quality. The amplitude of each of these bands is recorded and subsequently decoded when the process is reversed by applying those amplitudes to bandpass filters through which another signal, called the carrier, is run. A frequency-rich carrier signal, such as a saw wave or white noise, is needed for the filters to properly convey the speech data. In World War II, the vocoder gained significant importance as a way to encrypt speech, protecting it against interception. At the start of the war, the Germans were listening in on transcontinental communication between Roosevelt and Churchill, so the U.S. commissioned Bell Labs to further develop vocoding technology, which they did, successfully encoding subsequent wartime communication. In his book, How to Recognize Speech, the vocoder from World War II to hip-hop, author Dave Tompkins writes that they didn't mind world leaders sounding like robots, just as long as they didn't sound like chipmunks. Eisenhower did not want to sound like a chipmunk. By the late 1940s, composers began to see the vocoder's applications in the burgeoning field of electronic music, but it took until the 1960s for Siemens to develop a synthesizer which featured a vocoding component. From then on, people such as Wendy Carlos and Africa Bambaataa, and groups like Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream have brought the sound of the vocoder to a broader audience. In this section, my voice is being carried by a saw wave at 52 Hz. Section 2. As you can tell, the sonic density has increased from the previous section. I have split the vocal signal and am processing it as 2 different vocoders. In the first, the carrier is alternating randomly between a single oscillating pitch and a series of 4-note saw wave chords. These will be explained in more detail in the forthcoming sections. In the second vocoder, the carrier is a triangle oscillating in pitch, which is being delayed around between 0 and 1.5 seconds, subtly time-stretching the voice as the delay time changes. Both the extreme pitch oscillation and time stretching greatly increase the noise content of the output of this vocoder, and thus the perceived chaos of the section. The 2 vocoders are hard left and randomly switch positions with each other, making the ability to follow this monologue particularly difficult. This section will return later in the piece as a sort of compositional, hopefully creating a sense of continuity. Section 3. Here we have the first vocoder from the previous section isolated, the saw wave randomly oscillating in pitch, and the 4-note saw wave chords. One of the most important aspects of this piece is how the text both explains how the piece functions and itself generates the piece.
while not exactly self-generating, which would require more complex systems of feedback between input and output than I have time to develop at this point in my life. The content, which I consider the text, generates the form, which I consider the temporal arrangement of sonic material. I put quotation marks around content and form because of the fraught history of the two terms and their somewhat problematic duality. While I predetermine the parameters of the carrier signals of the vocoders in this piece, the rhythm and amplitude of my voice reading this text set off randomized systems that shape the sound of the carriers. The most important way this happens is through a transient detector I created in the max patch. The average amplitudes of the modulator over 3 seconds, 300 milliseconds, and 100 milliseconds are compared, and whenever the amplitude exceeds that value, as long as there is at least 50 milliseconds between each occurrence, a bang is outputted, which is then used to trigger other events in the patch. In other words, this means ideally that every word and syllable will cause a bang to be outputted, causing events to correspond one-to-one with the rhythm of the text. As I'm sure you have noticed, I am speaking in a slow and somewhat exaggerated manner. By putting enough space between words and pronouncing them in a very proper way, I am helping the transient detector do what I want it to do. Notice how almost every change in the carrier signal corresponds with a syllable in the text. Of course, this is not always the case, as the design is only as good as my skills in Max MSP are, which are admittedly rudimentary at best. But generally, the desired effect is achieved. Before my voice enters the vocoder, I am applying an audio gate to the signal with fast attack and decay times in order to filter out unwanted noise. I then am subtly compressing the output of the gate so the amplitude of the signal entering the vocoder is more consistent. Another way I am helping the transient detector do its job. The carrier signals in this vocoder will return again in the piece, at which time I will talk about them in more detail. Section 4. Now, for the first time since the first section, there is a single carrier signal, slightly modified from the previous sections. Like before, it is a single saw wave oscillating randomly in pitch, slewing between pitches. Differing from previous sections, however, the range of the random pitches and the rate at which the pitches change, no longer triggered by the transient detector, are greatly increased, lending an almost comedic effect. I increased the range and rate not only to increase slightly the level of variety in the piece, but to test the limits of the comprehensibility of speech through the vocoder. As the two increase, the comprehensibility should obviously decrease, but I hope that I have reached a happy medium and you are able to understand this part of the monologue. Section 5. As promised before, the material from Section 2 section turned. This is the only material that repeats verbatim. By material, here I mean the combination of carrier signals in their systems and randomized behavior triggered by the transient detector, not the text, which is, of course, now different from Section 2. As I also mentioned, I wanted to bring this material back to a sort of frame to perk up the ears of the listener. In composer Fred Laird's 1992 essay, Cognitive Constraints on Compositional Systems, in which he critiques the work century modernist composers, specifically Boulez's Le Marteau Sans Maître. He writes, At global levels, parallelism becomes the overriding grouping principle. Listeners try to hear parallel passages in the overall structure. While I believe that the essay is overall short-sighted and aesthetically biased, layered always point about the importance of repetition on a macro-temporal level in the cognition of music. My advantage about which he writes is that I have the ability to get material verbatim, which, though produces the same sound world, never outputs the exact results twice. Section 6. Like Section 4, here we have a single carrier signal, which first appeared in Section 2, the 4-note saw wave chords. The chords are parallel root position major 7th chords in open voicing based on the B minor pentatonic scale. B major 7, D major 7, E major 7, F sharp major 7, and A major 7, respectively, which are then randomly selected. This selection of chords is a nod to house music of the 1980s and 90s, in which producers often used similar chord progressions, heavily rooted in modern jazz of the 1960s and 70s. Additionally, the vocoder was a favorite tool of early electronic dance music, so the combination of the two seemed natural to me. An important aspect of the piece that I have not yet mentioned is the fact that I am using a special type of vocoder called a phase vocoder. This is a more complex version than the standard vocoder, known as a channel vocoder, because it uses a short-term Fourier transformation, STFT, a specific type of a Fourier transformation algorithm, which are used to transform functions of time into functions of frequency, extremely important in the analysis of periodic and time-dependent phenomena such as sound. Whereas the channel vocoder is reliant on a fixed set of frequency bands, the phase vocoder detects and computes exact frequencies, which are then outputted, giving a far more accurate reproduction of the characteristics of the modulator signal. In combination with the phase vocoder, I have been speaking through a Shure SM57 microphone. While not typically used as a vocal microphone, it has a slight amplitude boost around 6 kHz, which accents the sibilance of my voice. This combination leads to an increased intelligibility of the words of this text. Section 7. This is the final section and a sort of compositional bookend to the piece. Like the first section, the carrier is a saw wave at a fixed frequency, this time dependent on the last pitch of the single saw wave carrier at the end of Section 5. This has been an exercise in creating as self-contained a piece as possible, using as little material as possible, while still maintaining a certain level of interest and coherence. I believe that both the use of text in the generation of the material and the separation of discrete sections by silence is especially useful
Not house music.